Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show that's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Clarice. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I wasn't sure what to really expect with like how things ended at the last episode. What obviously now we know not Luann but Marilyn, because I was confused. I was like, wait, which one is which? Like, because I figured out I was like, was that supposed to be Marilyn or was that Luann? Like, I wasn't really 100% sure. I was bouncing back and forth very confusingly at the end of the previous episode, but we get our answer immediately that it is Marilyn, that the one over there is Lynn. But it is interesting because Marilyn was the one that was sick, interestingly enough. They never actually went into what Luann's whole situation was, only that her circumstances was like in her condition she can see and hear but she can't move any other part of her body. It was almost justice for what happened to her, but because I know Marilyn talked about what happened to her, but never like what happened to Luann. Because like Clarice was kind of making it seem like, oh, you did this to her, but she never corrected Clarice. So I just thought that was interesting. But obviously for her, like she kind of paralyzed Clarice from like the waist down, so it's like she can't move her legs, and so obviously she's trying to pump Clarice for answers because it's like, all right, like what do you know? How much does the FBI know? Like how did you know to come find me? But then Clarice ends up telling her later on, like, oh, you had a whole bunch of evidence in your house. She's like, no, that's not possible. Of course it's not. You're so meticulous. There's no way you would have left any evidence behind. But there was clear evidence suggesting that you were the one responsible behind everything. So that means the people you're working with are trying to turn on you. But she didn't want to believe that because working with them, because obviously we still don't know like what necessarily she was getting out of the clinical trials. I don't know whether it was she was doing the clinical trials because she thought it would. Because it's like, yeah, the medicine you didn't know would have like the birth defects that it would, but I'm thinking and wondering, could it simply be the fact is too that she was working on this medication, that this clinical trials were supposed to potentially help her situation, you know, the little bit she's still dealing with, but also her sisters, like maybe that was what it was supposed to be, like so that no one would ever have to go through what she went through, or you know whatever's happening with her sister right now. Maybe that's where, so it came from a good place, but then it became a situation of now I gotta like cover tracks because now what I did is causing a whole bunch of issues, and you know this reporter's looking into it. I'm assuming like whoever it is that's behind all this is someone that gave her the funding needed to do that. So if she goes down, they potentially go down too. So it's about, obviously it's about saving their asses as much as it is saving hers. But the way Clarice is pointing out, it's like, no, they're willing to make you take the fall. Even Clarice kind of getting in this laughing fit, being like, they're going to dump you because they always dump the girls. Like, look at all the victims who are connected to this case, that all the women, all that terrible stuff that was done to them. It's basically saying like, oh, it's going to happen to you. The girls always end up getting dumped at the end. But obviously it's like she's looking for Rebecca, but it's like we don't know where Rebecca is either. But you know, Marilyn wasn't really listening to her, didn't really believe Clarice saying, because she was asking Clarice, like, is anyone to come looking for you? And Clarice was like, I don't know. Because also, like, once again, I brought it up last episode, they literally had that conversation last episode about the fact is that she, you know, Paul grilled her about the fact is you went to Buffalo Bills without any backup, not letting anyone know, you know, where you were going. Like you could have not only could you have gotten killed, but any agent coming looking for you could have been killed as well. So that was the whole point Paul was making last episode. And we, like I said, sadly and ironically enough, like obviously the way last episode ended, I was like, yeah, she kind of fell back into that cycle. And you know, Ardelia, you know, says like that's just the way Clarice does. She operated on loan when it came to Bill. She at the BAU, she did the same thing. It's her safe and comfort zone because it's just like she's not really good at connecting with people, which hey, I get it. I think it's just obviously her situation is a byproduct of her upbringing, like, you know, because we dived a lot into that this episode, because obviously from the drugs she's a little loopy seeing her dad, and her dad's buzzing away those flies. He's like, oh damn flies. I was like, is it because you're dead? And it's like, lo and behold, they turn around, he's got the massive gunshot wound in his head. But that was really interesting, especially because retrospectively, because I think for Clarice, that point in time when she was a little girl, around that time with her dad, that was a very cherished time for her, because like obviously after that, like her entire life got flipped upside down after her dad died, because so much changed. Her mom couldn't afford to keep all of them, so Clarice ended up living with her mom's cousin. And obviously we get a little bit of that in the Silence of the Lambs movie about like what kind of went down at the ranch. And, you know, I think she had talked about it, and we see a little bit of it is like her trying to run away with the lamb. I'm assuming it's after what happened to the horse. And she knew that was going to happen to the Lambs, and it's just like to see that kind of happen at such a young age, especially like going through what she had gone through with her dad. I think that was all just kind of traumatic. I mean, who knows, there might have been more going on at the ranch, because I think more so than anything it was just a reminder, like seeing what, like, because the getup is like the mask that the horse was going to wear, and it has a hole in it for, like, I think the bullet or bolt, I guess, because I think that's how they kill cows, sadly, is kind of use a bolt gun like that. But I think that was like a straight up bullet for horses. I think, at least that's what it seemed like. So I think for her, maybe it was just a reminder of her dad, and that's what, especially because it was like, this is, it's like, yeah, this horse was almost blind, but I loved her. Like, so it was like something she had gotten attached to just to lose in the end. And I think at such a young age, after the trauma of losing her dad of a similar thing, gunshot wound and everything like that. Granted, maybe she was filled in at such a young age about what happened. I mean, the fact, because I don't know whether, like, the gunshot wound thing, because obviously she knows, but who knows if that's something she found out about later in life, or whether that's something she found out at such a young age. Either way, obviously, like, that caused that trauma, and that trauma got resurfaced the moment, like, that family was killing a horse. Granted, we don't know, like, once again, in the Silence of the Lambs, she touches on it a little bit, but doesn't go as deep on it in the grand scheme of things. So maybe there's a lot to that story that hasn't really been delved into yet. But I just thought the whole circumstance was really interesting. Like I said, I was surprised at, like, how Marilyn was taking care of her. But for Marilyn, it's like, all the people there, all those patients, it's like, for her, these are people who were forgotten because she herself was forgotten. So taking care of these people was kind of making up for the fact that her family didn't take care of her. And to a certain extent, Clarice can understand. Granted, Clarice made sure not to dive too deeply into her own situation, but I think she found there was some parallels between her and Marilyn and Clarice, because Marilyn felt like she was forgotten by her family, and these are people who were forgotten for different reasons under different circumstances that led them to this situation. Because of her condition at such a young age, it also, like, her illness led her to a very similar situation that all these other people are in, including her sister being paralyzed and not being able to see and hear, but can't move or do anything else. But so for these people, for her, they're her family, because these are people she's taking care of, even alphabetizing, because even Clarice was like, did you alphabetize these people? And even later on saying, like, oh, let me go check the C-section. Granted, we don't know if that was, like, all in Clarice's head, or whether she was really saying that, like, oh, I'm going to see if there's any room in the C place. And the fact is that she categorizes these people. Like, she gets to know it's that thing of, like, getting a little too attached to your patients, but it's also like she looks at them and it's like, oh, but fam, because I'm the one that's here for them. I'm taking care of them when they have no one else but me, and I sadly have no one else but them. Because even Clarice was getting into it. It's like, oh, you were an invalid, and she was like, invalid. It's like, yeah, they didn't want you. They forgot about you. And that's why I'm still alive. Because if you really want to kill me, then do it. You can kill me. But you can't, because if you do, I'm kind of all you have right now. Because by talking to me, it gives you some semblance of, like, connecting with someone. Because otherwise, all you have are these people that can't talk back to you. So it's like, that's why I'm alive right now. Because you have no one else. And even calling her a bitch, which I can't help it. Anytime, like, the word comes up, Key and Peele have screwed me over, because I always want to go. I even did it during the show. I was like, bitch. It's like, just like, that whole bit, just like, you know what I said? I said, bitch. That's what I'm saying. I said, bitch. Like, I can't help that. Like, that's always going to be ingrained in my head now. Damn you, Key and Peele. Regardless. I was like, yo. But what I also thought was interesting, like, the way, like, Clarice handled that. It's like, it's very her, but also I was like, that's a little Hannibal Lecter of you, even at one point in time, because Marilyn was like, no, you're not going to get answers from me. You're answering me. I'm not answering you. But she's like, I give an answer, you give an answer. I was like, that's a very Hannibal Lecter response. I mean, I guess that's what she's kind of pulling from too, because it's like, that's how the whole game worked between you and Hannibal, and then Silence of the Lambs. So I thought that was interesting. But obviously for one, it's not just a threaten Clarice. She was even, like, using the shock pads, the shocker, to try and get information out of her. But obviously every time she did it, it was triggering something. Obviously memories of being back there with Bill, being back on the ranch, like stuff about her dad. It was really interesting how that, like, obviously, even that creepy moment earlier in the episode when she was looking at the glass ceilings and, like, a whole bunch of, like, those moths came and broke through the glass and was, like, obviously she to be fair, she was on some drugs, so she was very loopy, so it's understandable why, like, her mind was kind of as scattered as it was to a certain extent. But like I said, it is interesting, kind of circling back really quickly about how Marilyn didn't want to kill her, because even though Clarice attacked her and then she like injected her, and Clarice is like, I can't breathe. She's like, I'm sorry, you made me do that. I did. It's like she was actually panicking, because it's like, I need you alive because I need to know how much you know. Because also it's like, if Clarice dies without knowing what Clarice knows, then Marilyn can't bring that to whoever she's working for, so that her and Luann can get out of there. So this is their tickets away from this situation. It makes you wonder, if it wasn't for that, though, how would things have played out? Like, they would have ended up dead in some shape or form. Got them out of there long enough to get them away and kill them, because you can't take the chance that, Clarice and the FBI already found their way to you, so there's no way, because you need them dead, because hiding them, it's not going to be easy to hide them, and also it's like, you just can't take the chance they ultimately end up getting caught and get asked questions, so I just thought that was kind of fascinating in the long run. But like, that's why I thought it was interesting that she's like, no, I didn't mean to do that, you forced my hand, you did this, you were being selfish. So it's like, because it's like, me and my sister's lives are on the line in this situation. You trying to get free. How dare you try to defend yourself and try and get out of this situation where I'm keeping you here held hostage, that most likely when it's all said and done, I'll kill you, because I can't let you go knowing what you know now. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. But like I said, I think that feeds into more what Clarice is also talking about. Like, you can't kill me because I've got I'm all you have under these circumstances. You're alone. You kind of have no one. Because she talked about, like, when she was sick, Luann preferred being outside. So it's not just her family, it's also like not just her parents, like they were working on her time, but also Luann, like they weren't there for her, they didn't take care of her, so she's grown to resent them a little bit. And once again, that's why she cares so much about these patients, because she's like them. She was forgotten, and it's like to be there for them of like, you're not forgotten. So they've kind of become her everything, her obsession. So without them, and that includes Clarice, she kind of has nothing and no one. So that's also why I think she holds on to her sister so much too, because if she ever just left her sister behind or whatever, like, she'd have nothing and no one. So I think that's kind of where that, all psychologically, I think that's where that all kind of stems from. What I also thought was an interesting storyline for that whole situation too, on the side, Clarice's side of things, was, well, first and foremost, like, the fact is her dad was like, oh, you wrote me letters. And she was like, I wrote you letters? It's like, yeah, she didn't really remember it. But apparently, like, she ended up remembering, like, oh, she ultimately ended up burning those letters. And it's like, why did I burn them? It's like, well, there was something in there that you didn't want to really talk about. Because part of me, he was, so I guess it's like, once she had started talking about the letters, and obviously is, ultimately what was happening to the horse, she didn't want to think about that, didn't want to remember it. So it's like, I think by burning the letters, it made it less real, or maybe the letters themselves were a stark reminder of, not only, because she even said it herself, like, she knew the moment she saw the mask what that ultimately meant for the horse, like what they had planned at the end of the day, that they were going to kill the horse. So I think she probably just burned the letters just just so they wouldn't be a reminder, or maybe she burnt them just hoping that by not talking about it, maybe things will be different. Like, it'd be kind of like not acknowledging, and if you don't acknowledge it, maybe things will kind of work out in some shape or form. What I also thought was interesting too, that both her worlds kind of bled together, like the Buffalo Bill thing as well as Marilyn, because she sees Marilyn holding Precious, and it's like, oh, you think you know me or see me or something like that, while she's at the bottom of that well. Like, just her mind combining everything. Like I said, she's just not in the right mind state, and obviously the whole Bill thing is always kind of on her mind to a certain extent, so like her reality blurring together like that was interesting in the long run. Hell, it even comes back later on when she does kind of manage to make her like final escape. Like, she's running, and obviously she's thinking about Bill, because her being loopy and everything, it makes her think about being inside of that house, and he's got the lights turned off, and he's got the infrared, and he's able to the night vision goggles, so he's able to see her, not infrared, night vision goggles, and he's able to see her. So I forgot what it was he was actually saying to her at that point in the episode, because like her first attempt to kind of get away, because she's made 3 attempts. The first attempt, she attacked Marilyn. The second attempt, she ended up, crawling away, but she walked up to the person that's, or at least one of, if not the person behind everything. The moment he picked up her phone, I'm like, you're about to, and lo and behold, he smacked her in the face with it, knocking her out. So obviously that's me focusing on the Clarice side of things. Obviously, what started all this is Ardelia, because Ardelia sent a couple messages, like pages, to Claire, but Clarice didn't. I should just say Claire. Clarice didn't respond, and for her, it's like the reason why this hits Ardelia so much, because she's up talking about the Tripodi, is like, yeah, we didn't end things off in a good place. I kind of told her, kind of went off on her about the fact is that me and her don't see the world in the same way, and obviously that's a hard conversation, because he's like, yeah, I understand like that being a hard conversation, but for Ardelia, it's like, I don't want that to be the last conversation between us, because regardless of anything, that's still her friend. Like, yeah, they have it was kind of like a rude awakening for Clarice, but it's like, I don't want us being at odds to be the last thing between us. So, and obviously it's a situation of everyone trying to, because obviously you have Clark, Murray being like, maybe she's out, at the movies or something. It's like, yeah, Clarice, who's working on a case and a murder and conspiracy case, is just going to go and do that. And it's like, Clark realizes what he's saying. It's like, yeah, like all of us, she's exactly like all of us. She has no life or something like that. Which Tripodi's like, no, I got a life. It's just, I forgot what he was implying, like, oh, I have a life, but it's not like all easy. That it's almost, I forgot what he was saying. It was like, I don't think it was necessarily the word fulfilling, but he was like, yeah, I have a life. Like, he's kind of implying, like, oh, I'm a little different from the rest of y'all. But I did like that line from Clark where he's like, nah, we're all going to go together. Like, I'll go with you and Ardelia because, or at the very least, he was like, I'll go with you, Esquivel, because the last thing is I need more of you youths disappearing, ending up on a milk carton. And it's like, oh, well, your mom sees me every morning, so she doesn't mind. I love he says that. I don't know if Clark understood what he was saying, because he said it in Spanish, so I don't know. But regardless, when they do start examining the place, obviously, Esquivel notices the picture's gone. It's like, what? It's like, well, snipers. We notice stuff. Like, what else do you think snipers are for? He's like, killing people. But he also picks up what Clarice was saying. He was like, yeah, Murray was like, yeah, this place, evidence is planted. It feels a little too, for whoever lives here, so meticulous for that evidence to be there. It's a little too easy, too obvious. So obviously it's like, well, we got to bring Paul into this, because Paul's dealing with some real family stuff, which we see he's meeting with his future ex-wife Mandy, in the sense that, like, obviously, because it's confusing, because it's like, oh, let's have dinner, and like obviously she's like, oh, like, you still haven't, it's like, despite everything you do, jumping out planes, going after the people you go after, you still get a nosebleed just anytime we talk about our potential divorce. So I was like, okay. So I was like, I guess they're in that weird spot where they're in the process of getting divorced, but they're still kind of friends. I think it's kind of like supposed to be like one of those weird situations. There's a movie, I think it was, who was it? It was, it's an Andy Samberg movie. I don't remember who his ex was. Oh, Rashida Jones, if I remember correctly. Yeah. They were basically exes that stayed friend. I remember I started the movie. That's a movie I got to circle back to, because I remember starting it. I just never finished it. It's from a couple years ago. But yeah, like the friends were weirded out by it. It just kind of reminded me of that a little bit. We get a little bit into like what their situation is. It seems that both of them were drinking and they both stopped drinking. And now the way Mandy was kind of talking about it, she was saying like it comes a little harder for her, because I think it's like it's a family thing. Because I don't know if I say this, but I'm not saying it like I know for a fact. But I think alcoholism is, I don't know if it's hereditary. I think it kind of is. Like I said, I'm not a geneticist. I think it can be hereditary. I definitely know, like, obviously, like, you have a higher chance of being an alcoholic if someone in your family is one, especially, like, but the way Mandy was talking about it, I don't know whether it's, like, just, like, a familial thing in the sense that just, like, just, like, her mom and dad were that, or whether it's, like, a generational familial thing. But regardless, it seems like that's why part of like them getting divorced, because I guess them butting heads a lot. It's like there's good with this, but there's also a lot of bad. So we'd be doing everyone a favor by splitting up. And he was saying like, I'll take the kids. She's like, whoa, what the hell are you talking about? He's like, it's like she's like, with your job and everything. He was like, my job was never the issue. It was that it's that we drank and this was the better solution. But for her, it's like, what are you going to do? Like while you're in the middle of a murder case, go pick up our kid from school. It's like, no, it's not going to work like that. It's like, I'm the one with it, like, obviously suggesting, like, his job in the first place, that he kind of put his job first is what led to a lot of issues in the first place. So, obviously they didn't get to finish that conversation because Paul got hit up about Clarice's situation. By the time he turned back around, Mandy had already left. So, what seemed like what was starting off as a civil and kind of bittersweet situation kind of turned sour, I think, in general. I mean, obviously there's like a lot of underlying issues that we only got like a peek into, like whatever their circumstances are. Seems complicated as hell, to say the very least. So, interesting developments. What I also thought was interesting too, like Marilyn kind of, it's like the dude's like, oh, you told me to come here because you had something for me. It's like, no, you told me to come here just because you want me here. Just because by me coming here, it makes me complicit. It makes it so that there was evidence I came here. So also, like, she was saying something about an incinerator. Well, they were originally going to take Clarice there, but I was wondering if they had like some evidence they were going to dump off there as well. Who knows? But when it was all said and done, though, Clarice managed to make her escape. And who knows how much Luann did, like, help her. Well, because obviously Luann's situation, I don't know whether Luann was trying to stop her because she could hear and see even though she can't move her body. So I don't know whether that was her way of trying to help Clarice. But Clarice did almost try and kill her. I mean, she knew that, Marilyn would be able to save her, but it's just she needed a distraction long enough to get away. Luckily, she runs into Ardelia and them. Ardelia and Paul end up rolling up on Marilyn, and Marilyn's trying to save her sister. But luckily Paul was able to save her, and I was actually surprised too when Marilyn was attacking Ardelia like that with that metal pen and everything. I was like, damn. But she ultimately ends up killing herself because it's like she knew that she was cornered, and if she isn't her, like, I guess maybe she had just kind of given up because it's like, I'm here dead. Well, at least is it up to someone else to take care of my sister, because if I go away, that person that's going to leave my sister all alone anyway, and I won't be able to take care of her. And maybe in some shape or form, maybe it brought her like, oh, I can finally find some peace of my own. Like, because she knows, like, if I get taken down, like, this is going to all go back on my sister. So at least this is her way of kind of ironically protecting her sister, maybe even herself. I don't know. But Marilyn dies, and along with her, the identity of the guy, because Clarice couldn't see his face. Granted, she was a little loopy, plus she was like crawling on the floor at the beginning, and also the next time she's able to be awake and see him, it's from behind. So I think eventually it's going to become a situation where she eventually hears his voice again, and that's going to trigger like her being able to remember who this guy is. So we have no idea the full extent of what was behind all this, because their one lead ended with Marilyn, but I'm curious to see what this means in the long run for Clarice. Is this going to be big changes for her going forward? Because is she going to get reprimanded for like going off on her own like this? And once again, Paul's probably be like, we had this conversation last episode, and you're having this conversation now again. What ends up happening there? Because obviously for Clarice, it's like about before, and Ardelia was like, no, we have the time. For now, just rest. Like, we'll talk everything out later, but for now, just rest after everything you've been through. And she leans on Ardelia, and Ardelia leans on her. I thought was kind of, neat. Obviously, like, she already went through a very PTSD moment just dealing with the Bill thing, and she's still suffering from that. So that in conjunction with this, who knows, what that will end up doing to her. I'm sure they're going to put her through another psyche valve, because she's supposed to be going to see a new therapist anyway. She was going to, last episode, she talked about finding one of her own, so we'll see kind of if that ends up playing a part next episode as well. But I'm really interested to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.